All right, guys, I'm pretty fired up about this because it has to do with kids. And here's what's going on. Wayfair is an online retailer, and today the employees staged a walkout saying that they do not want the company to provide $200,000 worth of beds to the migrant kids in the detention centers. Beds to kids. They don't want beds to go to kids because they are morally against the detention centers. So let me just back this up and explain to you everything that has happened leading up to this point and why I absolutely think that this walkout itself is not only absurd, but it's immoral. And I'm saying this, and I get it. Everybody that's for the walkout is on the left or a liberal or whatever they want to call themselves. And I'm also on the left and a liberal, but I'm absolutely not okay with this walkout. It is not the right thing to do. Here is what happened. So recently in the last week, we found out the abhorrent, horrible conditions that these kids are in at these migrant detention centers. The conditions are unimaginable, and they're absolutely not okay in the United States of America. What we discovered over the last week was that these kids are sleeping on floor mats with small blankets, if they have any. They don't get any toothbrushes. They're not getting clean clothes. They're covered in dirt and snot. They're being fed very little food. It is not the way we treat people here in the United States of America. And we have been angry over this treatment of these migrant kids. We've spoken out. We have said this is wrong. We will not stand for this as Americans. We will not treat people this way. And you know what? The government heard us. They did. And apparently they started taking steps to help these migrant kids. They tried to transfer them to a different facility. And apparently they've been placing orders for items that these kids need, items we demanded they should have in these migrant detention centers. So here's where the Wayfair walkout begins, because a social media account on Twitter, which is why I hate that platform, because this is always where it begins. It's always Twitter. It's some social moral outrage, and it just goes crazy. And this media account broke the news saying, here's a tip, Wayfair spent $200,000 in beds for the kids. And they said, do you want to, let me just show you what the actual tweet is. If I could find it here, where did I? Sleeping Giants is the account. Breaking. Just got an anonymous tip that Wayfair has, in fact, taken orders for beds to use in child detainment facilities. Wayfair, can you confirm or deny this? So I want to know, Sleeping Giants, why do you think providing beds for kids in a detention center, that we have been outraged at the treatment of these children, how they're sleeping, the way they're being treated? Why would you think giving them beds is all of a sudden a bad thing? That's what I want somebody to explain to me. Why these migrant kids shouldn't have beds. Their answer, all the people on social media that are for this walkout, say, because we don't think the kids should be there at all. But I'm going to explain something to you. So, essentially, Wayfair did confirm that they did, in fact, take an order from the government for $200,000 worth of beds. That news got out to the employees, and the employees were outraged. And by the end of the day, they had organized a walkout to protest Wayfair making these beds. What they were protesting specifically is they don't want to make these beds for what they believe is like a concentration camp. They feel like they don't want to be morally a part of anything that's going on with that. And I understand that sentiment. I do think that they're coming from the right place. They're just totally misinterpreting they're, for one, not understanding the situation at all, and they're taking it to an extreme. So here's what the employees of Wayfair said. They said, quote, "The United States government and its contractors are responsible for the detention and mistreatment of hundreds of thousands of migrants seeking asylum in our country. We want that to end. We also want to be sure that Wayfair has no part in enabling, supporting, or profiting from this practice." Now, Wayfair responded and said, "As a retailer, it is standard practice to fulfill orders for all customers, and we believe it is our business to sell to any customer who is acting within the laws of the country within which we operate. This does not indicate support for the opinions or actions of the groups or individuals who purchase from us." So that's a valid point that Wayfair has. I mean, just on an individual level, it's not like they can vet every single customer and say, who are you? Do I agree with you? If I don't agree with you, I'm not selling to you, even though what you're doing is legal. Like maybe, let's say Wayfair, for example, let's just assume for a second that they were this like super right-wing Christian organization, and didn't want to sell to gay people. You'd be absolutely outraged on that. And they would say, look, we morally are against it. So We can't do that in this country. We're not for that. We don't think people should be able to pick and choose who they sell to based on their morals. That's not being a liberal. So here's the thing. Now, I get it, like I said, that you don't, like these activists are saying, or these employees are saying, we don't want to be involved in this mistreatment of the hundreds of thousands of migrants seeking asylum in our country. But you have to understand something. Most of these migrant kids that are in this facility showed up at the border alone. We cannot, because it would be inhumane, to then bring these kids in, process them, and let them loose. They're kids. They have to go somewhere. And they need to go somewhere right now. So if you're the Border Patrol person and you find this kid and they're thirsty and they're needing treatment and they're starving and they're at your border and they're alone, you have to take them somewhere right now. You don't get to wait. You don't sit in there and think, well, where you need to take them somewhere right now. So these facilities that the Border Patrol has set up are the facilities where those kids go right now. Under any administration, whether it be under the Obama administration or whether it be the administration after Trump, before Trump, during Trump, after Trump, when you find a migrant at the border, they got to go somewhere, especially a kid. So the thing is that what we want is for where we take them to be clean, safe, comfortable, and to get them situated. We want them to have beds. We want them to have toothbrushes. We want them to have clean clothes. We want them to have food. We want them to have at least all the things we give to prisoners in the county jail. Okay? That's what we want for these migrant kids. That is what the government, after our outrage last week, is now trying to do. And that's why they're putting in orders with Wayfair. And I'm sure Wayfair is not the only company. I'm sure that they bought beds from Wayfair and they bought toothbrushes from someone else and they bought blankets from someone else and they bought diapers from someone else. And are we going to go and boycott all of those companies and say, oh, we're going to walk out from those companies. We don't want to work for these companies that provide for these kids. And we're also going to walk out because, oh my gosh, we don't want diapers for toddlers. We don't even want them in the facility. Where the hell do you want these kids to go when they show up at the border? They have to go somewhere. So the point is, these kids, now, they're supposed to be out of here. The problem with what we discovered was that they should be out of this facility within 72 hours. And because we're seeing such an influx in migrant at our border, they're not. There's too many. They can't be transferred to the Department of Human Health and Services as quickly as they should be. So some of these kids have been sitting in this facility much longer than 72 hours, more like up to a month, some of them. Some of them get in and out at 72 hours. Many of them don't. The problem is what we saw was that they're not being transferred out fast enough. So we're not clearly supporting Health and Human Services enough. And secondly, the conditions they were in while they were there. We're saying, listen, this is not okay. But what's really not okay to me is to then turn around and say, okay, I want you to fix this, but now I don't want you to fix this. And actually, I don't want you to provide anything for these kids. I want them to sleep on dirt floors. I want them to remain in snotty conditions so that I can have a political win? No, that is not American either. That isn't. These kids, no matter what, are going to have to go somewhere. And I want, over my dead body, I want these kids to have beds and toothbrushes and food and over this stuff. And it'll be over my dead body that you don't give them these things. I am outraged by this. I'm outraged by the way these kids have been treated by the U.S. government. And I'm outraged by you so-called liberals on Twitter and that have created this walkout and this boycott because the kids are now getting beds. What is wrong with you? This is not okay. This is not okay. Now, you want to know a boycott that actually makes sense. For example, was some of the major airliners like American Airlines and United Airlines. They said, listen, we will not allow our planes to be used to separate children from their parents. So if you want to separate kids from their parents, you find someone else to take them. But we're not going to be the ones that are going to enable that to happen. We're not going to put those kids on the plane, and we're not going to go then ship those kids to Chicago or New York, thousands of miles away from their parents. That is an understandable boycott because those airliners said, we will not be a part of the separation of these kids from their parents. That makes sense. But what doesn't make sense is for you to say, I don't want to give that kid a bed because I don't like what you're doing in this facility. I don't think they should be in the facility. Well, then where should they be? when they show up at our border? Where are we going to take them? Even if we got Health and Human Services totally on track, we got the kids in and out of there in 72 hours, and we were under a new administration. Let's say we revert, we go back 5 years. It's Obama administration, and this is what's going on. Those kids still need to have a bed. For those 72 hours, they still need to have a bed. And here you are boycotting it, saying, no, you don't want it? What is wrong with you? I am not okay with this at all. I am so upset about this, obviously. Listen, I get it. My mother was a refugee. My mother went to one of these camps. She was an underage teenager who came to this country as a refugee. She went to these camps. She was processed through a camp. She went through that. I am not unaware of what's going on. My mother has told me everything. She didn't have a bad experience at her camp. She kind of liked it. It wasn't a bad place. Now, she was given bed. She was given food. She was given clothes. She was given these things that we're asking for. And because of it, she had a fairly pleasant experience being processed through the camp. She doesn't have any negative memories from it. And that is what we're trying to provide for these kids. We want them, if they're going to be there, which they have to be no matter what, for at least 72 hours or at least a day. I mean, at least a night. If we pick them up at the border and we take them somewhere, we clean them up, we give them a bed, we give them some food, and we hopefully get them out to Health and Human Services where they can go to maybe a foster home or something, or be reunited with family members here in the United States, which is why they've shown up at the border. That is what we should be boycotting. That is what we should be, that's what we should be outraged about, and what we should be calling for change on. Is we say, look, give them beds, give them toothbrushes, give them clothes. You better do this. This is our tax dollars. We're paying $700 a kid, and you're not doing these things. Why? We want that now, today. Today is too late. You should have done it days ago. You should have done it months ago. You should have done it years ago. And now we want it. And certainly we're not going to sit there and say, okay, now I don't want them to have it. I changed my mind. I actually don't want them to have it because I want this political win. I want you to continue to look like a monster so that I can continue to shout about this. Guys, it doesn't make sense, okay? It doesn't make sense no matter what. Asylum seekers and migrants have to be processed in facilities. There's no way around that. The only thing that we can do is make sure that those facilities are comfortable, clean, sanitary, and provide for them what they need. That's what we need to do, okay? This Wayfair walkout is ridiculous. You got to stop and think for a minute before you start to join in on this shit. Stop and think about who you're harming, because the only people you're harming in this situation are these kids. That's it. Just so that you can, have a one-up on Republicans? That's not okay at all. Not okay. So that is what I have to say about that. Thank you guys for watching, and speak up, speak up and fight against this kind of stuff. When people start to tout this kind of bullshit, you got to take to Twitter, and I try to get off Twitter, but I saw this and I thought, no, I have to speak up for kids. I have to speak up for kids because this isn't okay. So get out there and say, guys, as a liberal, I am not okay with this. This isn't okay. You stop this. Stop it. Okay? They need beds. We need to be smart. This is not the thing to boycott. This is not the time. You see something, say something, as they say. So thank you so much for watching and listening to this rant. And I just need to get that off my chest. And hopefully that made a difference. And hopefully that explained to you, if you're one of those people that thought that this was a good idea. Plenty of our Congress people did. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez thought it was a good idea. Joe Kennedy III thought it was a good idea. Rashida Tlaib thought it was a good idea. They're wrong. It wasn't a good idea. This was a horrible idea.